Hey friends, it's Gloria and welcome back to another video. This is going to be the traditional mid-year book freakout tag, answering a bunch of questions that are going to look at my reading year so far. Now, this tag for me has shifted. I'm a little bit more like Caleb from Books and Lala. I just hodgepodge some random more questions in there than the traditional ones, and I've included some of my own, or I think some I've seen. I don't know, but I'm answering kind of different questions than people usually answer. So for me, number one is the stats. How many books read, genre, format, that kind of thing. So I've read around 70 books that I'm counting, like books that I've chosen for myself for the most part to read. I'm also keeping track of all the books that I read Finn, just because I love these kinds of things. I love keeping track of stuff, and I want to one day give Finn a list of all the books that he's ever been read his whole life. So I'm keeping track of those. I'm not counting every time I read one book, but each book individually. And if I'm including all of those, I'm like around 130, but around 70 books that I choose myself. Those do still include some picture books and some board books that I would have picked up either way if I had a kid or not. But around there, which is amazing for having a new baby. And you know, I'm reading a ton of books. I'm able to read that many because I listen to primarily audiobooks. I did do Kindle reading for quite a while, like January through March. I was pretty much reading at least a couple Kindle books a month because I was holding Finn for naps, or I had trouble falling asleep at night, or was awake at night and needed to go back to sleep. So I would just use my Kindle a lot. But since Finn has conquered night sleeping and is an excellent napper, I don't really get to use my Kindle very much because when my head hits the pillow, I'm out and I'm tired from just the whole day. So I really don't use my Kindle or e-reader as much as I'd like to. So all that to say, audiobooks are the way to go. For physical books, it's going to be some graphic novels and some picture books, but pretty much every single like full-length novel or nonfiction that I'm reading is audiobooks. And that's just the stage that I'm in right now, but no shame in that. I love audiobooks. For genres, always number one for me is historical fiction. Surprisingly, if I'm looking at Storygraph, romance and contemporary are second and third place. Who am I? I'm reading way less nonfiction than I have in the past 4 years since starting BookTube, which is shocking to me. I'm like at 11% nonfiction, I think. I don't really know how that's possible because usually it's like a 40% nonfiction, 60% fiction breakdown, but I'm slacking in nonfiction this year. I don't love that, but it is what it is. My brain can only handle like heavy books or books that make me think or really focus. That's not really what I can handle usually. It makes sense why my reading is what it is, because I'm kind of just reading more for fun or escape or just distraction while I'm like doing chores and stuff. All right, next question, and usually everyone's first question is, what's the best books I've read so far this year? I absolutely loved and was blown away by Unequal Affections. Is a Pride and Prejudice retelling fan fiction. Basically, if Elizabeth Bennet accepted Mr. Darcy's proposal the first time he proposed, and then it follows their 8-week engagement period until their wedding, and they have to work through all of the stuff that they didn't get a chance to work through as in the original story. It's so well done. I was absolutely blown away with this. If you are looking for a book to pick up for Jane Austen July, I would highly recommend this one. I absolutely loved it. I think it's my top book of the year, and I don't know if anyone's gonna beat it. So I might be mentioning it again when I talk about favorite books of the year at the end of the year. I also loved the nonfiction 40 Autumns by Nina Wilner. This is a family memoir nonfiction about a woman's family growing up on both sides of the Berlin Wall and living in East Germany and West Germany and escaping, I think, an underrated nonfiction book that more people should read. And even though I'm not reading much nonfiction these days, I am glad that I read that one this year and have a new favorite nonfiction, because last year I was definitely lacking. And then a third favorite was Maisie Dobbs by Jacqueline Winspear. I read this one recently in June, so I'll be talking about it in my June wrap up, but I absolutely love this one. I'm so sad that I've been sleeping on it and haven't picked it up for so long. This first book was originally published in 2003, and this is an ongoing historical mystery series. There's 18 books in total. The final conclusion and the 18th book just published in June. So the series is all wrapped up, but I loved this first book so much. This is one of those books that is just the perfect mix for historical fiction for me. It has a mystery element, yes, but it is very steeped in historical context and setting, which I think the author, Jacqueline Winspear, does an amazing job of. And it is set during World War I. It has a little bit of romance as well, which I enjoyed, and good friendship and family dynamics. It's just a wonderful character to root for. The next question is a new favorite author. Now, I count favorite authors if I've read multiple books that have been 5 stars, like amazing books, and that hasn't quite happened, but I have 2 authors that I've read multiple books from, and I'm planning to continue reading more books from because I've enjoyed their work. The first one I just mentioned, Jacqueline Winspear. I'm totally determined to read the whole series, and she has a couple novels that are not part of the series as well. I would love to read all of her work because this is just so fun, and I'm so invested in Maisie Dobbs and the series. And then secondly is Rosamund Pilcher. This is the Shell Seekers. I started with Winter Solstice, which I read in January and really enjoyed, and this one I read also most recently in June. I'll be talking about it and my feelings there. And I read another one of her books. They are not new favorite books because I have some issues with the characters, different choices the characters make and all that, but these books just have such a fantastic sense of place, and they're slow and just peaceful to read about. The three that I've read are set in England, and they mostly have to do with some sort of family dynamics, usually kind of a little messy, some drama, uncovering the past, stuff like that, but they are just so good, so cozy, even though there's so much that's heavy to uncover in these books as well. But for some reason, they're just working for me, and I'm determined to read a couple more of her books. Coming Home and September are the next two that I'm thinking about on the docket. Next question, what's the most disappointing book you read so far this year? I have two romance books, since I've read so much romance, weirdly, that I thought were trash. I just thought they were so not good. The first one is The Rom-Commers by Catherine Senner. This is officially the second book in a row by her that I've actually really disliked. I've loved The Bodyguard by her, but the other ones, these most recent ones are not for me. I just really didn't like a lot of stuff about this book. Again, I'll go into more detail in my June wrap up because I also read it in June, but I thought this was a bad one. And the other romance book that I read is Ready or Not. That has a pregnancy main character, like that's the main theme of the book, and I also hated it. I did not like the main character, I didn't like the romance, none of it. It was all ugh. So those two romances were a big no. And then a book that I was actually disappointed by because I had higher expectations because she's one of my favorite authors, and that is Amy Harmon's The Law of Moses. I am determined to read all of her books, including her backlist titles that don't really sound appealing to me because they're usually contemporary and they have horrific covers, but I love her so much that I want to read all her books because I'm just a completionist in that way. That's part of my personality. And I read this one and I did not like it. I think I gave it 2 stars. This was the first Amy Harmon book that I actively disliked as I was reading it. I was like, oh, I just don't like any of this. I don't like the romance. I'm not rooting for these characters. I don't care. This weird magical seeing dead people thing was super strange as well. I didn't care for it. And it's a series. There's a second book. And I don't want to read it, but I want to read it too because I was really hopeful that all of her books, including her backlist, were going to be great because I have seen a few people read this one and really like it, but not me. The next question is biggest surprise for reading, good or bad? And as I was thinking about this question, looking back at my reading, the one that kind of came to mind is How to Stay Married by Harrison Scott Key. This is a nonfiction memoir of sorts, one of the few nonfictions that I read, and I enjoyed is a hard word because this deals with very heavy topics, but I really was captivated by the story, the way it was told. The audiobook was amazing, and I feel like I talked about it a lot. I recommended this book to a lot of people in real life for me because I was just so curious what people would think. This is a story about a guy and his wife and how she cheats on him and he takes her back, and it's their tumultuous love story and their marriage and just all of the stuff that is wrong with these two people, but they're making it work. It was just so interesting to me. So that was a big surprise, was how much I liked it and how much I maybe recommended it to friends. Next question is a book that made you cry. And I don't think any books made me cry, but 2 books that I was emotionally invested in. The first one is The Women by Kristen Hanna. She knows how to write a story to get you emotionally invested, and there are some very hard things in this book, particularly the depictions of the Vietnam War were very hard to read about and quite emotional. And then the character was just down on her luck for a while, and she was just in the ringer of horrible things happening and just sadness all around. So it was heavy and emotionally hard, but such a well-written book that I was just swept up in it and read it super quickly, but very emotional. And I think I'm the rare person that didn't actually cry in this book. I feel like a lot of people did. And then the other one, Positively to Report, Running Barefoot by Amy Harmon. This is also one of her backlist books that I actually did enjoy, even though it is a contemporary young adult romance book, but I was also very emotionally invested in it and these characters. And there's also some tough stuff that happens in this book that was just totally gut-wrenching. I felt all the feelings even though I actively didn't shed any tears. Next is a book that made me happy. I feel like I will be answering actually what a lot of people are going to be answering for this question, and that is Funny Story by Emily Henry. I totally love this rom-com. It was such a fun time. I loved the main characters and their relationship because there was no miscommunication. It was actually like a friends to lovers thing. It was sweet. It felt realistic. There wasn't like anything that was over the top and stupid. I liked the choices that they made. I would 2 thumbs up this rom-com, which you don't get that from me very often. Next question is a book you learned the most from. Now, I've read very few nonfictions, but I have 4 that I totally learn so much from. The first one is The Mona Lisa Vanishes. This is a middle grade nonfiction about the famous artwork, Leonardo da Vinci's life, and a lot of the ins and outs of what happened. Someone stole the piece from the Louvre at a certain point, so it follows that as well. It was a really well done nonfiction. Highly recommend if you're interested in that topic. I mentioned 40 Autumns as a favorite book. That one I also learned a ton about what living in East Berlin was like when the Berlin Wall went up. Next, I mentioned this last month, but Ejaculate Responsibly was a very interesting book talking about birth control and how men should be responsible for that, and it just provided me with a lot of talking points when it comes to this topic and just made me think about some things. So that one was an interesting one. And then lastly, French Kids Eat Everything. Again, I'll talk about this book more in my June wrap up, but this book taught me a lot about the French way of life when it comes to teaching their kids how to eat and what to eat, and how completely different it is from our American culture. And there are a lot of takeaways that I would love to implement, but also sound so hard and so daunting because that is just not the way of life here. For example, snacking. No snacking. French kids don't snack ever. Like, no snacks in the car, no snacks after school, no snacking ever, ever, ever. And I'm like, that's literally American life. All kids do is they snack. And you give them snacks all the time. And I'm like, how the heck are you not supposed to give them snacks? Anyways, that's just one example, but this book has just made me think so much about some stuff I want to try to do, and I feel like I learned a lot. The next question is, what is the most beautiful book added to your collection? Thankfully this year, I'm basically not bringing any books home. I had one book haul, and since then I've hauled like 3 more books. I bring home a ton of stuff for Finn, a ton of board books, picture books, all the time. But for myself, not so much. And I'm totally okay with that because look at all these books. I have so much to read. But one book that I think is beautiful that I found is Pollyanna by Eleanor H. Porter. This is a beautiful little edition that has some lovely illustrations and like floral designs in there. There's an example of some of the artwork inside. I think this is a lovely little classic. I also really enjoyed this book, so I'm happy that I added this one to my shelves and read it and really enjoyed it. The next question is, what's a favorite video you made? I have been making like no videos, no like fun stuff. You know, I'm doing the usuals like the wrap-ups, but you know, I have a kid. It's hard. It's hard to even turn this on and make my face look nice and say anything to the camera and then edit it and get it up. But the one video that I have made that's like out of the ordinary was reading books with flowers on the cover, which was a vlog. I had so much fun with that because there was a theme. I love a good theme, and there's so much Finn content in that vlog because he was so stinking cute. So I had fun recording moments of my life and having that be a memory there. And based on this question, I mean, I have ideas always of stuff I want to film, but tell me, this is a good place for me to ask for information from you. What is something you would like to see from me? I feel like reading your comments and getting some feedback will give me a little motivation and a little pep in my step to actually film a specific type of video rather than, you know, the wrap up or the TBR or anything like that. So one thing that you would like to see from me, let me know in the comments down below. Any kind of video specifically would be nice to see. The next question is, what was a favorite book to screen adaptation? I'm not watching much these days. I watched the new season of Survivor. That's kind of it. My husband and I watched the second Dune movie, and I'm very in the minority. I did not like it as much as the first one. I actually was actively like uncomfortable in the movie theater, and I was regretting. Like I was still at the point where anytime you get a babysitter and I'm like, we're out of the house, like there's so much that we could do. We can go like eat a beautiful dinner. We can go be productive and do this and that. And as I was sitting in that theater in that long movie, I was like, I hate this. Why am I here? There's so many other things I could be doing. I don't want to be here. I didn't actually hate the movie, but I just really didn't like it. It was too dark for me. I was like so uncomfortable, and I think maybe I'm just also sensitive, you know, postpartum or something, but I don't know. I didn't like the second Dune. That's such a tangent, but also an unpopular opinion. We did watch Silo, which is based off of a book series, and I did enjoy it, and I'm very confused. When I'm confused about a show and I know there's a book, it makes me want to read the series. But I've heard not great things about the Wool series by Hugh Lowe or something like that. Let me know if you've read the Wool trilogy, which the show Silo is based off of. It's like a sci-fi series about people living in an underground bunker, and then they don't know why they can't go outside. Like something happened. They're told these stories, but what's actually true, we don't know. Anyways, let me know if I should read that first book because I'm intrigued enough on the show. But I heard the show's better than the books. I don't know. Tell me. What do you think? And then the next question is anticipated releases, ones that have come out or maybe are coming out. For ones that have come out, I put them on my NetGalley. I got approved, and because of my personality, I have to read them. I cannot let them sit on NetGalley. I'm determined to read the Hazelborn Society of Flying Ladies or something like that because it's on my NetGalley. So I will be reading that, even though I don't know anything about it, but it was the cover that caught my eye. I will be reading Shelterwood by Lisa Wingate. I'm actually currently reading that, but it's literally taking me like 3 months to read, and I'm just waiting for the audiobook to come in so I can finish it. That's telling you how I'm feeling about the book. And then I also will be reading Briar Club by Kate Quinn because I also requested and got approved. So those 3 I think have come out or are about to come out. But the ones I'm actually excited for, like those 3 I'm not very excited for anymore. I feel like it's past. I regret, like I have that NetGalley regret, like, oh, I wish I didn't request it because now the pressure's on to read it and I'm not really drawn to read them. But these next 3 I'm actually super stoked to read, and I feel like I will actually read them when they come out. The first one is Here One Moment by Leanne Moriarty. I love Leanne Moriarty. She's one of my favorite authors. I'm also determined to read her to zero and read all of her books. Her newest one's coming out. I didn't even know it was coming out, and I think the cover is absolutely atrocious. This does not look like a modern cover for 2024. I'm quite disappointed with it, but I'm intrigued. I absolutely have no idea what it's about. I'm going in totally blind, and I'm good with that. Next one is The Bletchley Riddle by Ruta Sepetys. Again, one of my favorite authors. I've read every single one of her books. She writes for YA usually. This is her first middle grade, so I will definitely be picking that up. And then finally, Christmas with the Queen by Hazel Gaynor and Heather Webb. I think they are an author duo that wrote The Last Christmas in Paris, which is one of my favorite books of last year. It was this beautiful epistolary war novel that was just amazing, and I am so here for their next book that they're co-writing together. The next question is, do you feel your reading tastes have changed or shifted at all this year? Anything like that? Like I said, I've just kind of been reading more fun stuff, and I've not really been actively participating or planning as much as I maybe usually would. I feel like I've embraced romance. Clearly it's one of my 3 genres, even though I'm still super picky and I give most of them lower ratings. But I'm just gonna not say that I'm not a romance girly, because at this point I'm just reading them. They're fun, and I will just be the one that, you know, finds the rare gem in the bunch that I actively like, even though most of the time I'm like, ugh, rolling my eyes. I feel like I'm surprised about the slow storytelling that I liked about Rosamund Pilcher's writing, so I'm kind of intrigued about these like slow, cozy English countryside books. I feel like I kind of knew that about myself, but enjoying those has solidified that. And then because Unequal Affections is one of my favorite books, I feel like I need to read more Pride and Prejudice retellings or fan fiction of that sort for Jane Austen. Maybe I should read all of Jane Austen's books first. I should probably do that. I have 3 more of her main novels to read, but I'm also in for the Pride and Prejudice kind of retellings to maybe find some more gems in the bunch. I know it's Jane Austen July. I'm sure there's gonna be tons of recommendations, but if you have your like top 1 that you would recommend, I've already read The Other Bennet Sister and Unequal Affections. Those are the only 2 I've read, and I loved them both. So if you have a recommendation, please let me know. And then the second to last question, if you set any bookish goals for yourself this year, how are they going? No, I did not set any goals. I didn't even do the 24 books to read in 2024. I didn't really make any yearly TBRs. I didn't do so great last year, so I didn't want to put the pressure on. You know, reading in itself is an accomplishment, like any book at all. But I feel like an unsaid goal of mine is to read more books off my shelves, and I have been doing pretty good with that because I've been buying way less. Like the number of books going out of my house is way more than the books coming in when it comes to the books I want to own and the books I'm reading. So I feel like that's an accomplishment for me, even though it's like an unsaid goal. And like I mentioned, I haven't been reading as much nonfiction, which is such a bummer. So I do want to work on that maybe for this second half of the year to spruce up my nonfiction reading and get more excited about that, so that my number isn't like 11% of nonfiction read for books this year. So I hope to change that in the latter half. And then finally, what do I want to read next? Like I said, I loved Maisie Dobbs, and I'm kind of determined, we'll see if that changes, but I'm determined to read the entire Maisie Dobbs series this year. I think I can do it. Spoiler alert, I already read the first 5 in June. I kind of want to read the next 5 in July, so that's 10. And then there's 18, right? So I think I can read 8 for like August through December. I would love to like start and finish a series like that. I'm such a binger in that way, because otherwise I'm going to lose steam and then I'm going to forget about everything, and then I'm just never going to read the series. And that's kind of how I am with like Outlander. Like I was so hyped for it and I was on it, and now I'm like off the bandwagon, and it's so hard for me to pick up the next book even though I want to, because I want to finish the series. So that's how I am. So I want to read that. And like I mentioned, some of those anticipated releases, I hope to get that NetGalley number down, as well as those 3 coming out the latter half of the year. But I think other than that, like no pressure. I haven't made really any TBRs, and it's been okay. It's been kind of sad because I feel like I want to make a list, but I know I'm not going to stick to it. I did my historical fiction TBR and I read a few books on that, and I have others lingering. The completionist in me just wants to read those anyways this summer, so that might happen. But yeah, no pressure. I'm not really having any kind of TBR or set list of books. that's just where I'm at. So that wraps up the mid-year freakout. That's where my reading's at this year. Let me know about feedback from some of those questions I asked. How is your reading year going so far? Any favorite books that you would recommend? Because I totally get persuaded. Your guys' comments always push up the books in my mind. All it needs to do is be available on Libby, and I'm checking it out and reading it. So I do really appreciate that. Thank you so much for watching today, for tuning in, spending this time with me, and I'll see you guys in another video soon. Bye.